October 8th, 1999. The control tower of Mexico City International Airport. The radar screens flicker with their usual phosphorescent green glow, casting dancing shadows on the weary faces of the night shift. The time is 2:14 a.m. The silence in the tower is almost ceremonial, broken only by the electric hum of the equipment and the occasional crackle of radio communications. The city sleeps beneath a blanket of twinkling lights, while 200 feet above, 4 air traffic controllers watch over the night sky with practiced routine. Suddenly, something appears on the secondary radar. A blip. No transponder, no flight plan, no identification, moving with a cadence that matches no known pattern. It landed, but it wasn't an airplane. Those were the exact words that Roberto Méndez Alcántara, a senior air traffic controller with 15 years of impeccable experience, wrote with a trembling hand in his personal logbook that morning. An object had penetrated the most controlled and monitored airspace in the country, descending slowly toward Runway 05R without authorization, without communication, without any explanation. In one of the most closely watched skies on the American continent, where every movement is tracked, recorded, and documented with military precision, something had achieved the impossible. It had landed without leaving an official trace. For 25 years, what happened that morning remained hidden in a bureaucratic limbo of classified reports and sealed memorandums. The witnesses were silenced. The records disappeared. The recordings vanished. Now, after a quarter of a century, an air traffic controller is breaking his silence from his deathbed. This is the true story of what landed in Mexico City and why it was never reported. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more cases like this, and hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. Roberto Méndez Alcántara was 42 years old in 1999. He was a meticulous man, the kind who checked every procedure 3 times, who never left anything to chance. He had started his career at the airport at 27, gradually rising through the ranks to become one of the most respected controllers on the night shift. His colleagues described him as unflappable, capable of handling the most stressful situations with a calm that inspired confidence in even the most nervous pilots. At home, Roberto was the husband of Carmen Gutierrez, an elementary school teacher and the father of 2 children, Roberto Jr., then 15, and Sofia, 12. The family lived in a modest house in Coyoacán, 40 minutes from the airport. Carmen recalls her husband leaving for work every night at 9 p.m., always with the same ritual: a kiss on the forehead for each sleeping child, a long embrace for her, and the promise to watch over the sky until dawn. Roberto loved his job, says Carmen, now 67, as she holds a photograph of her husband in uniform, taken in October of 1999. He used to say that at night, the planes looked like moving stars and that he was a cosmic orchestra conductor, guiding each one to its safe destination. But there is one object that Carmen guards with special care, kept in a bank safe deposit box all these years. Roberto's personal logbook, a navy blue hardcover notebook that he religiously took to every shift, within its pages written in the meticulous handwriting of a man accustomed to absolute precision, are technical notes, weather observations, and occasional personal reflections on the beauty of his nocturnal work. The entry for October 8th, 1999 is different. The handwriting is uneven, rushed, as if written with urgency and fear. There are smudges that look like sweat, and in one corner a circular coffee stain, as if the cup had trembled in his hand. That night, Roberto was not alone in the tower. He was accompanied by 3 colleagues, each with their own story, their own life, which would be irrevocably altered by the events of that morning. Miguel Herrera Soto, 35, was the radar technician, an electronics genius who had served in the Mexican Air Force before joining the airport's civilian team. Miguel was known for his photographic memory and his ability to spot anomalies in flight patterns with just a glance at the screen. He was married to Elena, who was pregnant with their first child. He would vanish without a trace 4 years after the incident, leaving his family with more questions than answers. His son, Miguel Jr., would never know his father. Patricia Dominguez Luna, 38, the approach coordinator, was the only woman on the night shift. An aeronautical engineer by training, she had turned down offers from commercial airlines to remain in the control tower. "I like being the first voice pilots here when they're coming home," she used to say. Patricia was single, completely dedicated to her career, and lived with her 2 cats in an apartment overlooking the airport. She would be abruptly transferred to Guadalajara in 2000 and would take early retirement 5 years later, always refusing to speak about her time in Mexico City. Javier Ramos Quintero, 48, the night shift supervisor, was a veteran with 22 years of service. A father of 4 and grandfather of 2, he was known for his sense of humor and his ability to keep morale high during the long nights. Javier would die in a car accident in 2007. Under circumstances his family still considers suspicious. An experienced driver on a road he knew perfectly, on a clear night with no skid marks. But perhaps the most disturbing detail isn't in Roberto's logbook, but in the official tower shift log, of which Carmen also kept a photograph. On the page for October 8th, in a different handwriting from the normal entries, someone wrote in red ink, "Do not log." Those 3 words, hastily scrawled in the margin, would be the first sign that what happened that morning was no ordinary incident. October 7th, 1999 began like any other Thursday at Mexico City International Airport. The forecast from the National Weather Service indicated clear skies with unlimited visibility, a temperature of 18 degrees Celsius, and northerly winds at 5 knots. Ideal conditions for night operations. Roberto Méndez arrived at the airport at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes before his shift, as was his custom. He parked his 1992 Volkswagen sedan in his usual spot, B47, in the employee lot, and walked toward the control tower building. Gazing up at the cloudless, starry sky where a crescent moon provided a soft, natural light. The shift change at 10 o'clock p.m. was uneventful. The evening supervisor, Carlos Mendoza, gave his report. "All quiet, Roberto, just one delayed flight. The United from Houston should be in around midnight, otherwise the sky is yours." The official records, those that survived the subsequent documentary purge, show that between 10 o'clock p.m. and 2 o'clock a.m., exactly 47 operations were managed, 23 takeoffs and 24 landings, all within normal parameters. The last registered commercial flight was Aeromexico AM 447 from Los Angeles, a Boeing 757 with 147 passengers, which touched down without incident at 1:53 a.m. At 2:05 a.m., the tower confirmed there were no more scheduled flights until 5:30 a.m., when the morning departures would begin. Roberto instructed his team to enter a period of reduced surveillance, a technical term meaning they could relax a bit, grab coffee, and review paperwork, while always keeping one eye on the screens. At 2:14 and 33 seconds, according to the radar system's timestamp, a moment Roberto would memorize with obsessive precision. Miguel Herrera noticed something unusual on his secondary screen. "I have an unidentified echo in the northeast sector," he reported, his voice professional but tinged with curiosity. "Distance 45 kilometers, altitude 10,000 feet and descending." Patricia Dominguez immediately checked her approach screen. "Confirmed, I have it too. Speed, this is strange. It's showing a constant 180 knots." It was an unusually slow speed for that altitude. Too slow for a commercial jet, too fast for a small plane. "Any military flights scheduled?" Roberto asked, quickly checking the logs. "Negative," Javier Ramos replied after checking the database. "No military NOTAMs for tonight." Patricia immediately tried to establish contact, following standard protocol. "Unidentified aircraft in Mexico City airspace. Identify yourself on frequency 100.15. Silence. She repeated the call in English. "Unidentified aircraft in Mexico City airspace. Please identify yourself on frequency 100.15. Nothing. She tried the emergency frequency 243.0 MHz. "Aircraft approaching Mexico City International Airport. Respond immediately or you will be considered in violation of airspace." The only sound that came back was static, but not normal static. Roberto would later describe it as patterned static, as if something were broadcasting on a frequency their equipment couldn't properly decode. The object continued its descent, maintaining that unnatural, constant speed of 180 knots. At 2:16 a.m., it crossed 5,000 feet. Roberto picked up the military-grade Steiner 7x50 binoculars they kept for visual observation and scanned the northeastern horizon. At 2:17 and 18 seconds he saw it. "Mother of God," was all he could say. It had no regulation lights, he would recall in his final testimony, his voice breaking with the memory. No red or green navigation lights on the tips, no white strobe, no anti-collision beacon. Just a glow, like polished metal reflecting the moonlight, but the glow seemed to come from within the object itself, as if the metal were translucent. Miguel Herrera adjusted the radar controls, thinking it might be an equipment malfunction. "The signal is solid," he reported, "but there's no transponder return. It's like it's just solid metal with no electronics." Javier Ramos then made a decision that would mark the rest of their lives. He did not activate the airspace violation protocol. Procedure dictated he should have immediately notified the Mexican Air Force, which would have scrambled interceptors from the Santa Lucia Air Base. "Let's wait," he said. "Let's see what it does. It could be an emergency flight with total communication failure." But they all knew that didn't explain the lack of lights, the impossible speed, or the perfectly vertical trajectory the object began to follow in its final 1,000 feet of descent. The object continued its approach toward Runway 05R, the farthest from the terminals, a 3,900-meter runway usually reserved for maintenance during the night. At 2:21 and 45 seconds, the radar showed the object had touched down. Roberto and his colleagues watched, stunned. Through the binoculars, Roberto could see the object on the runway, but its shape was hard to define. It was triangular but not triangular, he would later explain, as if the shape subtly changed as you watched it, like one of those optical illusions where a cube seems to invert itself. For exactly 8 minutes, the object remained motionless. The airport's security cameras, Roberto would later discover, recorded those minutes. But the video showed only a blurry, pixelated mass, as if the object were interfering with the camera's electromagnetic signals. At 2:29 and 45 seconds, without warning, without gradual acceleration, the object rose vertically. Not at an angle like a helicopter, but perfectly vertical, like an invisible elevator. It reached 1,000 feet in less than 3 seconds, an acceleration that would have killed any human pilot. And then it simply vanished. Not gradually, not by flying away. One moment it was there, the next it was not. The radar lost it instantly, Miguel recalled before his disappearance. It didn't go out of range, it didn't fade, it was as if someone had flipped a switch. The first 48 hours after the incident were a whirlwind of covert activity that Roberto would meticulously document in notes hidden in his personal locker. Notes his wife wouldn't discover until after his death. At 6 o'clock a.m. on October 8th, just as their shift officially ended, Roberto and his three colleagues were intercepted in the locker room by security personnel none of them had ever seen before. They weren't wearing regular airport uniforms, Roberto wrote. Black suits, no insignia, just an ID they flashed briefly. It said CI-SEN, but the format was different from the ones I'd seen in security training. They were escorted, not invited, to an extraordinary meeting in a room Roberto swore he had never seen in his 15 years working at the airport. It was located in the basement of the administrative building, accessible only by an elevator that required a special key card. The room had no windows and the walls seemed to be lined with some kind of absorbent material, which Roberto described as being possibly to prevent electronic eavesdropping. 3 men were waiting for them. The tallest, a man of about 50 with a prominent mole on his left cheek, whom Roberto would forever refer to as the man with the mole, led the meeting. The other 2 never spoke, only took notes on electronic devices Roberto couldn't identify. "What you witnessed this morning," the man with the mole began, his voice monotonous, almost robotic, "was a controlled national security operation. It was not a UFO. It was not an unexplainable phenomenon. It was a classified test of defense technology that, for reasons I cannot disclose, required the unannounced use of your facilities." Roberto knew they were lying. The technology they had witnessed was decades, perhaps centuries, ahead of anything known. But he also knew that contradicting these men would be dangerous, possibly fatal. They were made to sign non-disclosure agreements, multiple copies, each one more threatening than the last. The final document was explicit. Violation of the agreement would result in charges of treason, punishable by 40 years in prison. The document also mentioned, more subtly but with equal clarity, that their families could face certain hardships if the agreement were breached. Roberto secretly managed to keep a carbon copy of one of these documents, using a technique he had learned during his military service. He placed a sheet of carbon paper beneath the original as he signed, capturing a faint yet discernible impression. He hid this copy inside the cover of a procedural manual he knew no one would ever consult. On October 10, 1999, Roberto was summoned again, this time alone. He was taken to a different office where a man who identified himself as Colonel Silva, a name Roberto highly doubted was real, showed him a memorandum classified as ultra-secret level 5. "We need additional technical details," Silva said, his voice flat. "You are the most experienced of the group. What else did you observe that you failed to report?" Roberto knew it was a test. If he revealed something he hadn't mentioned before, they would know he had been hiding information. If he added nothing new, they might suspect he was still holding back. He chose a middle path, offering technical details any competent controller would have noticed, but which wouldn't alter the fundamental nature of the event. "The object generated no wake turbulence," Roberto stated. "That's physically impossible for any solid object moving through the air." Silva noted this without a flicker of emotion. "Anything else?" "When it took off, my communications gear experienced a strange interference, not normal static, but like voices sped up or slowed down, impossible to understand." This seemed to catch Silva's attention. "Did you record this interference?" "The recording system was running, so it should be in the archives." Of course, those recordings would mysteriously disappear 2 days later. Within the airport, the administration began to actively spread 2 disinformation theories. The first, aimed at the general staff, claimed it had been an unannounced military exercise involving a new surveillance drone that had experienced technical problems. Ground crews were told the marks on the runway were the result of a new type of experimental landing gear that had malfunctioned. The second, more elaborate theory was selectively leaked to higher-ranking personnel. The object was a foreign spy plane, possibly Russian or Chinese, which had been forced to land. by secret Mexican electronic defense systems. This version explained the cover-up as a matter of national security to avoid revealing defensive capabilities. But Roberto and his colleagues knew the truth. In a whispered conversation in the employee restroom with the faucets running to foil any potential listening devices, Miguel told Roberto, "I've reviewed the radar readings over and over. That thing accelerated from 0 to Mach 3 in less than a second when it took off. No known material could withstand those G-forces without disintegrating." The most critical error in the cover-up was precisely the failure to activate standard protocols. If it had truly been a classified military test, at least the upper echelons of the Air Force would have been notified. The fact that no one at the Santa Lucia Air Base knew anything about the incident until days later, when uncomfortable questions began to be asked, suggested that even the military had been caught completely by surprise. The years following the incident were a slow, psychological torture for Roberto Méndez. He continued to work in the control tower, but every night was a reminder of what he had witnessed and could not discuss. His wife, Carmen, noticed immediate changes: chronic insomnia, weight loss, an obsession with drawing every curtain in the house the moment dusk fell. "Roberto installed 3 additional locks on our front door," Carmen recalled. "He bought a radio frequency detector and would sweep the house with it every week. When I asked him what he was looking for, he would just say, 'It's better not to know.'" In January of 2000, Roberto discovered the first concrete evidence of surveillance. During a routine call with his brother in Guadalajara, he clearly heard an echo of his own voice, repeating his words with a roughly 2-second delay. When he casually mentioned that the line seemed to have a problem, he heard a distinct click and the echo vanished. He developed an elaborate system of countermeasures. He would buy prepaid phone cards with cash, use them only once from different public payphones. He created a code with Carmen. If he ever called and mentioned he needed to buy milk, it meant he was in immediate danger. In 2001, something happened that intensified his fears. Roberto came home one afternoon to find his study had been disturbed but subtly. The books were in the same places but slightly misaligned. His computer was on, though he distinctly remembered shutting it down. Nothing was missing, but someone had been there. It was then that he requested a transfer to the day shift. His superiors, perhaps relieved to not have to deal with his growing paranoia during the sensitive night hours, approved the request without question. But the day shift brought its own challenges. Roberto now worked with dozens of controllers who knew nothing of the incident. He would overhear their casual conversations about UFO sightings or conspiracy theories and have to bite his tongue to keep from screaming, "I know the truth, I saw it." Miguel Herrera was the first to break. In 2002, he began drinking heavily. His wife, Elena, told Carmen that Miguel was having recurring nightmares, where he saw triangular lights descending over their house. He spoke in his sleep, repeating the numbers 2, 14, 33 over and over. Elena had no idea that 02-14-33 was the exact time the object had first appeared on the radar. In March of 2003, Miguel called Roberto at 3 in the morning. "I saw it again," he said, his voice trembling. "On the radar, the same signal, Roberto, the same damn signal. They came back." Before Roberto could respond, Miguel hung up. It was the last time anyone ever heard his voice. His car was found 3 days later on a secondary road near Pachuca, engine still running, driver's side door wide open with no trace of Miguel. Patricia Dominguez chose a different path: absolute silence. After her forced transfer to Guadalajara, she cut off all contact with her former colleagues from Mexico City. She changed her phone number, closed her email accounts, and practically vanished. Roberto managed to track her down once, in 2004 at a cafe in Tlaquepaque. When he confronted her, she looked at him with dead eyes and said, "I don't know any Roberto Méndez. You must be mistaken." Then she stood up and walked away, leaving her coffee untouched. Javier Ramos seemed to be handling it best, at least on the surface. He continued to work, was promoted to senior supervisor, and even received commendations for his service. But Roberto knew the truth. At after-work gatherings, Javier would drink too much and, when he thought no one was listening, would mutter, "We should have reported it. We should have followed protocol." In 2006, Roberto made the decision to take early retirement. He was only 49, sacrificing nearly 40% of his potential pension. During his farewell party, a moment captured on video, a colleague joked, "Well, Roberto's taking all the airport's secrets with him." The camera caught Roberto's expression, a flash of pain and fear that lasted only a second before he forced a smile. On September 15, 2007, Roberto got the news. Javier Ramos had died in a car accident. The official report said he had lost control of his vehicle on a curve, but Roberto visited the crash site. The road was straight. There were no skid marks. Javier Ramos's car had simply veered off the road as if the driver had suddenly lost consciousness. In 2009, during an archival audit at the airport, Roberto learned from a contact still working there that all documentation from October 1999 had vanished. Not just for the 8th, but the entire month. 31 days of records, thousands of operations simply erased from official existence. April 17, 2023, would change everything. Diego Salinas Rojas, a final-year aeronautical engineering student at the National Polytechnic Institute, had secured an internship at the Mexico Air Traffic Control Center. His project was ambitious but seemingly innocuous: to digitize and preserve historical communications recordings from the control tower as part of a national historical archive. Diego worked the night shift in the administrative building's basement, surrounded by dusty boxes of magnetic tapes dating back to the 80s and 90s. It was tedious, monotonous work, perfect for a student needing to log service hours. Most tapes contained routine communications, takeoff clearances, approach vectors, the occasional weather report. On the night of April 17th, Diego was processing a box labeled simply 1999B. There was something odd about this box. It was sealed with industrial duct tape, not standard packing tape, and it was water-stained, as if it had been stored somewhere damp, away from the main archive. Inside were several tapes, but one caught his eye. A handwritten label in faded ink read, TC 199B. Below it, in red pen, apparently written by a different hand, were the words, "Do not catalog." Diego, driven more by curiosity than rebellion, decided to listen to the tape before following the instruction. He connected it to his digitization equipment, put on his headphones, and pressed play. The first few minutes were normal. Routine communications from October 7th, 1999, the transition from the evening to the night shift. But then, at 2:14:33 on the recording, everything changed. "I have an unidentified echo in the northeast sector." The voice was clear, professional, but laced with an undercurrent of tension. Diego sat up straight in his chair. For the next 47 minutes, he listened, mesmerized, to the entire sequence of the incident. The voices of the four controllers were distinct, their attempts to communicate with the object, their mounting confusion. And then something that chilled Diego's blood. At 23 minutes and 14 seconds into the recording, when the controllers indicated the object had touched down, a background sound became audible. It wasn't static, not interference. It was a low-frequency, rhythmic, almost musical hum. Diego, who had experience with audio analysis from his hobby in electronic music, immediately recognized this was not a recording artifact. Using Audacity software on his personal laptop, Diego isolated and amplified the sound. What he discovered left him breathless. The hum contained an embedded mathematical pattern in its frequency, a sequence of pulses that, when translated into numbers, represented the first 20 prime numbers arranged in a spiral no terrestrial mathematician would have ever designed. But there was more. At the 31-minute, 22-second mark, Roberto Méndez says something that appeared in no report. It has no definite shape. It's like, my God, it's as if it's not entirely in our dimension. Diego immediately made 3 copies of the recording, one to his personal hard drive, another to a USB drive he hid at home, and a third he uploaded to an encrypted cloud server using a VPN and an anonymous account. 48 hours later, he was summoned to an urgent meeting, not with his direct supervisor, but with 3 men in suits who identified themselves only as national security personnel. "You have accessed classified material," said the tallest one, a man in his 50s with a northern Mexican accent. "We need all the copies, now." Diego, nervous but smart, handed over 2 decoy USB drives he had prepared, claiming he had only made local backups. He didn't mention the cloud copy. "This material is part of an ongoing national security investigation," the man continued. "Any disclosure will result in criminal charges. Do you understand?" Diego nodded, but in his mind, a plan was already forming. If this recording was real, if this incident had truly happened, someone somewhere had to know. He began searching online, in aviation forums, in groups for retired air traffic controllers, for any mention of the incident of October 8, 1999. That's how he found an obscure reference on a blog abandoned since 2010, where someone mentioned the incident we can't talk about and listed 4 names: Roberto Méndez, Miguel Herrera, Patricia Dominguez, and Javier Ramos. Diego Salinas began his search with the only name that seemed traceable: Roberto Méndez Alcántara. He found a matching profile on LinkedIn. Former employee of Mexico City International Airport, retired in 2006. The profile picture showed a man in his mid-60s with tired but alert eyes. Diego sent a carefully worded message. "Mr. Méndez, I am an aeronautical engineering student. I found something from October 8, 1999, that I believe belongs to you. I would like to return it." The reply came in less than an hour. "Café La Habana, Coyoacán. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Come alone." On May 3, 2023, Diego walked into the cafe with a laptop in his backpack and his heart pounding. Roberto Méndez was sitting in a corner, his back to the wall, with a clear view of both entrances. He looked thinner than in his LinkedIn photo, a cane resting against the table. "Pancreatic cancer," Roberto said without preamble as Diego sat down. "Stage 4. They give me 3 months, maybe 6 if I'm lucky. So tell me, young man, what exactly did you find?" Diego discreetly took out a pair of earbuds and plugged them into his laptop. He passed one to Roberto. For the next 47 minutes, he watched as the old man's face cycled through a storm of emotions: shock, fear, sorrow, and finally something that looked like relief. 24 years, Roberto murmured when the recording finished. 24 years carrying this alone. Do you know what it's like to live with a secret that could change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe? Roberto made his decision right then and there. It was time to tell everything. He contacted Maria Elena Gutierrez, an investigative journalist renowned for exposing a Gulf of Mexico oil spill that the state oil company had covered up for years. If anyone could handle this story, it was her. The recording sessions with Maria Elena unfolded at Roberto's home in Coyoacan over 3 days in April of 2024. His wife, Carmen, would brew coffee and remain nearby, gently adding details that Roberto had either forgotten or had long been hesitant to voice. Roberto kept everything, Carmen said at one point, disappearing into the basement. She returned with a shoebox filled with documents, photographs, and most importantly, the photographic negatives Roberto himself had taken of the marks on the runway. When digitized and enhanced, the photographs clearly showed the vitrified triangular pattern on the asphalt. But with modern image enhancement, details invisible in 1999 emerged. Symbols had been etched into the pavement within the triangle, characters that corresponded to no known writing system. Maria Elena consulted with Dr. Linda Manzanilla, an archaeologist at UNAM's Institute for Anthropological Research and an expert in pre-Hispanic writing systems. These are not Mayan, Aztec, or any Mesoamerican glyphs, Dr. Manzanilla confirmed. In fact, the structure of these symbols suggests a completely unknown logographic syllabic writing system. The investigation led Maria Elena to contact former airport employees. Many refused to speak, but 3 provided crucial information. Fernando Aguilar, a former runway maintenance technician. I remember that morning. They told us there was a chemical spill on 05R, but when we arrived, there was no chemical. Just those strange marks on the pavement. And the asphalt looked crystallized, like glass. I'd never seen anything like it. Rosa Maria Hernandez, a former administrator in the operations department. All records from October 1999 vanished during a system update in 2009. But it wasn't an update. I saw men in suits carrying out entire boxes of files, loading them into unmarked vans. Carlos Montemayor, the journalist who had tried to investigate the case in 2005, finally agreed to speak from Spain via video conference. They showed me pictures of my children, photos taken from angles only possible if someone had been inside their school. The message was clear: back off, or your family will pay the price. Maria Elena also uncovered a disturbing pattern. Using public databases and death records, she found that of the 17 airport employees in positions that would have given them knowledge of the incident, 11 had died within the next 10 years. The causes varied: car accidents, heart attacks, cancer, but the mortality rate was statistically impossible. A crucial breakthrough came when Maria Elena obtained a partially declassified document from CISEN, Mexico's intelligence agency, through an anonymous government source. The document, dated October 15, 1999, was heavily redacted, but included one uncensored sentence: the recovered object has been transferred to the North Facility for analysis. A follow-up note read, material inconclusive, origin undetermined, threat classification non-hostile but technologically superior. A recovered object. This contradicted everything that was known. According to Roberto's testimony, the object had taken off and disappeared. Had it left something behind? Or had there been a second object the controllers never saw? The exhaustive analysis of all the compiled evidence began to paint a picture that defied conventional explanation. Dr. Fernando Ochoa, of the National Polytechnic Institute, did more than just analyze the documented flight path. He created a computer simulation based on the radar data Roberto had memorized and transcribed. What we have here, Dr. Ochoa explained, displaying the simulation, is an object that violates at least 3 fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. First, the instantaneous acceleration from 0 to Mach 3 would generate g-forces that would liquefy any biological occupant. Second, there's no evidence of air displacement, which is impossible for a solid object moving at that speed. Third, and most unsettling, the object appears to have altered its mass during flight, suggesting a manipulation of the Higgs field, a technology we can't even fully theorize. The audio recording was subjected to even deeper analysis by a team of acoustic experts at the Autonomous Metropolitan University. What they discovered was extraordinary. The low-frequency sound not only contained the sequence of prime numbers, but when analyzed on a three-dimensional spectrogram, it revealed a mathematical structure. This structure described the exact coordinates of the airport, the date and time of the incident, and most astonishingly, a sequence that mathematicians interpreted as stellar coordinates, specifically the location of Zeta Reticuli, a binary star system 39 light-years from Earth. It's as if whoever or whatever was controlling that object wanted to leave a calling card, commented Dr. Luis Herrera, an astrophysicist at UNAM's Institute of Astronomy. But why Zeta Reticuli? The system has been cited in multiple close encounter cases since the 1960s. A coincidence? Statistically improbable. The most shocking testimony came from retired Colonel James Morrison, who expanded on his initial statement with details he had never shared before. In a second interview, this time in person at a Mexico City hotel with Maria Elena and Roberto present, Morrison, despite his failing health, revealed the full truth. The object didn't just land, Morrison said, visibly uneasy. There was contact. When the recovery team arrived at Runway 05R, they found more than just scorch marks. There was a device the size of a briefcase left in the exact center of the vitrified triangle. It was made of a material we couldn't identify, with a surface that looked liquid but was solid to the touch. Roberto was stunned. This information had never been shared with the controllers. Morrison continued. The device was taken to a special facility in the Sonoran Desert. For years, all attempts to open or analyze it failed. But in 2007, it suddenly activated. It projected a hologram, a series of images showing Earth from space, then zooming in on Mexico, on the airport, on the control tower, and finally, on the faces of the 4 controllers from that night. Roberto turned pale. They were watching us? Not just watching, Morrison replied. The hologram displayed your complete biographies, your families, your routines. Whoever left that device knew everything about you. And then, it showed something else. The same 4 faces, but aged, with dates beneath each one. Dates? Maria Elena asked. Dates of death, Morrison said gravely. Miguel Herrera, March 15, 2003. Correct. Javier Ramos, September 15, 2007. Correct. Patricia Dominguez, June 12, 2018. Correct. And Roberto Méndez, May 27, 2024. A heavy silence filled the room. Roberto glanced at his watch. It was April 25, 2024. Are you saying they knew when we would die? Roberto asked, his voice trembling. Or did they decide it? Morrison countered. We'll never know for sure. Maria Elena pressed for more information about the device's fate. Morrison revealed that in 2019, it vanished from the Sonora facility. It wasn't stolen. One morning, it was simply gone. Security cameras showed the containment vault sealed all night, but when they opened it, it was empty. But that's not the strangest part, Morrison added. The very same day the device disappeared, June 15, 2019, there was another incident at the Mexico City airport. Same runway, same 8-minute duration, same unexplained power outage. Roberto remembered the leaked video he had seen. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to lock into place, forming an image that defied human understanding. Maria Elena's research led her to contact Dr. Jacques Vallée, the famed French astrophysicist and ufologist. After reviewing all the evidence, Vallée offered a disturbing hypothesis. What you're describing is not a simple encounter with an extraterrestrial craft, he said via video conference. The elements suggest something far more complex, an intelligence that exists partially outside of our normal space-time. The fact that the object seemed, as Mr. Mendez said, not entirely there, suggests we are dealing with something that can move through dimensions we cannot perceive. A former CERN physicist who reviewed the data unofficially and anonymously went even further. If this evidence is genuine, and I have no reason to doubt it given the level of corroboration, then we are looking at technology that manipulates the fundamental structure of space-time. It's not just that they are technologically superior, they operate under physical principles we are only just beginning to theorize. It's like ants trying to understand a smartphone. Roberto, in the final weeks of his life, developed his own theory, one he shared with Maria Elena in their last recorded interview. "I believe we were chosen," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Four ordinary people at an ordinary job on an ordinary night. We were chosen to witness something extraordinary. Why? I don't know. Perhaps as witnesses, perhaps as a warning, or maybe, just maybe, as preparation. Humanity needs to know we are not alone, but it can't learn it all at once. It needs to filter down slowly through stories like ours, until the truth is undeniable but no longer terrifying." A final analysis revealed one last chilling detail. The symbols from the runway photographs, when run through an AI program trained to recognize mathematical patterns, produced an image. It was a star map showing the location of 14 solar systems, including our own. The other 13 systems perfectly matched stars where astronomers have detected potentially habitable exoplanets. "It's a map," concluded Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenolinguistics expert from MIT. "A map showing what? Inhabited worlds, colonies, a travel route? We don't know. But whoever left this wanted us eventually to understand." Roberto Méndez Alcántara died on May 27, 2024, exactly as the device had predicted. His last words recorded by Carmen were, "The sky is full of lights, lights that are not stars." The publication of Roberto's full testimony, along with all the compiled evidence, created an international media firestorm. The CDMX landing became a global trending topic. Pressured by public opinion and the international community, the Mexican government was forced to respond. On July 15, 2024, the President of Mexico held an extraordinary press conference. He admitted that certain anomalous events in Mexican airspace may not have been adequately reported, and announced the creation of a special commission to investigate all unexplained incidents dating back to 1990. Though statutes of limitation prevented legal action, the official acknowledgement was a moral victory. Carmen established the Roberto Méndez Foundation for Truth and Transparency, dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and witnesses of extraordinary events. Diego Salinas, the young man who found the recording, now works with international organizations documenting anomalous aerial incidents. His database includes over 200 verified cases globally that follow similar patterns. Maria Elena Gutierrez received the 2024 National Journalism Award. In her acceptance speech, she quoted Roberto, "The truth is not ours to hide. It belongs to humanity, so we can prepare for what is coming." Runway 05R remains operational. The night controllers all know its story. Some swear that on clear nights, when the conditions are just right, you can still see the subtle irregularities in the pavement where something once landed. Patricia Dominguez, the only survivor of the original 4 controllers, broke her silence after Roberto's death. In a letter to Carmen, she wrote, "Roberto was right, we were chosen to see the impossible." Now, thanks to his courage, the world can begin to accept that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. Roberto Méndez's legacy is not just the unmasking of a government cover-up. It is proof that the truth, no matter how incredible or terrifying, eventually finds its way to the light. As he wrote in his final logbook entry, "It doesn't matter how hard they try to bury the truth. The truth has a habit of resurfacing like the lights in the sky we cannot explain but can no longer deny."